It's the first thing we do in airports, hotels, coffee shops, and restaurants. We open our phones, scan for Wi-Fi networks, and connect, often without a second thought. But in January 2024, cybersecurity researchers discovered a network of public Wi-Fi hotspots that was doing far more than just providing internet access. When business traveler Michael Torres connected to what appeared to be a premium airport Wi-Fi network during a layover in Chicago, he had no idea that this simple action would expose not just his personal accounts, but his entire company's network to one of the most sophisticated digital heists ever documented. Security experts have confirmed that over 35 million credentials were stolen through compromised public Wi-Fi networks in the past year alone. Your banking details, corporate logins, and personal accounts could be among them. What these seemingly legitimate networks were silently collecting wasn't just basic browsing data. They were intercepting every password, every credit card number, and every message, creating a massive database of stolen identities that would drive a billion-dollar criminal enterprise. To understand how something as ubiquitous as a Wi-Fi network could become a sophisticated credential theft operation, we first need to understand the technology that powers our wireless connections. Most people think of Wi-Fi as a simple utility, like turning on a faucet for water, explains Dr. James Chen, network security researcher at the Cybersecurity Institute. But wireless networking involves complex protocols with numerous potential security vulnerabilities, particularly in public networks. When your device connects to a Wi-Fi network, it establishes an ongoing conversation with the access point, the router or hotspot providing the connection. This conversation includes all the data flowing to and from your device, from website requests to the content you're viewing. The fundamental security issue with public Wi-Fi is that many connections remain unencrypted or use outdated security protocols, continues Dr. Chen. Even when the network itself uses encryption, there are multiple points in the connection process where credentials and data can be intercepted. Public Wi-Fi networks like those in airports, hotels, and coffee shops are particularly vulnerable for several key reasons. Users cannot verify who actually controls the network. Many legitimate networks use minimal security to simplify access. Users regularly enter credentials and sensitive information while connected. High traffic volumes make it difficult to detect malicious activity. Travelers are often distracted and prioritize connectivity over security. Pause this video right now and check your phone Wi-Fi settings. Look at the networks you automatically connect to. Do you know who actually operates each of those networks? Are any set to auto-connect in public places? This simple check could protect your digital identity. Most users automatically connect to any available network, particularly when traveling or needing internet access in public spaces. This behavior created the perfect opportunity for what security researchers would later call Operation Hotspot, one of the most extensive credential theft campaigns ever documented. What made this operation unique wasn't just in its scale, explains Marcus Reed, digital forensic specialist. It was the sophisticated infrastructure designed to maximize credential capture while minimizing detection, all operating under the guise of legitimate public Wi-Fi services. The operation deployed advanced techniques far beyond simple man-in-the-middle attacks, including authentic-looking access points with legitimate-sounding names, sophisticated traffic manipulation to bypass security protocols, real-time credential extraction during browsing sessions, targeted interception focusing on financial and corporate access, dynamic IP rotation to avoid detection patterns. But how did this operation spread across major transportation hubs and public spaces without detection? The answer would lead investigators through a complex web of compromised hardware, inside access, and sophisticated social engineering. The discovery that would expose Operation Hotspot began not with law enforcement or government agencies, but with an alert network administrator at Meridian Technologies, a mid-sized software company based in Denver. Jennifer Park, Meridian's head of information security, noticed unusual login patterns for several executive accounts, successful authentications from multiple international locations within impossibly short time frames. What caught my attention wasn't just unauthorized access attempts. Those happen constantly, Park explains. It was the pattern of successful logins that made no sense. Our CFO appeared to be logging in from Chicago, then Singapore, then London, all within hours of each other. And these weren't failed attempts. They were successful authentications with valid credentials and proper multi-factor responses. This pattern suggested something far more concerning than stolen passwords. The attackers somehow had access to the company's full authentication process, including temporary multi-factor codes, something that should be technically impossible without physical device access. At first, we suspected a compromise of our authentication provider, continues Park. But when we contacted them, they identified something even more concerning. Our executives' devices were connecting through a series of untrusted network proxies at precisely the times when the suspicious authentications occurred. When Park's team cross-referenced the suspicious logins with executive travel schedules, a clear pattern emerged. Every compromised account belonged to someone who had recently traveled through one of several major international airports. The correlation was unmistakable, explains Park. Once we identified the pattern, we found dozens of affected employees. The common factor wasn't which airports they visited. It was that they had all connected to Wi-Fi networks with names like Premium Free Wi-Fi or Executive Traveler Network during their trips. What Meridian Technologies discovered was just the tip of the iceberg, explained cybersecurity expert Dr. Sarah Martinez. When they shared their findings with federal authorities, investigators discovered similar patterns affecting thousands of organizations, all tracing back to the same network of sophisticated Wi-Fi access points deployed across major transportation hubs. This wasn't an isolated incident targeting a single company. It was a sophisticated global operation capturing credentials from millions of travelers, an invisible digital pickpocketing scheme operating in the busiest public spaces in the world. If you've used public Wi-Fi at an airport, hotel, or conference center in the past year, what we're about to reveal directly impacts your digital security. The techniques we're uncovering are still being used in public spaces worldwide. As federal authorities began investigating the Wi-Fi credential theft operation, they faced an immediate challenge: how to identify and analyze the malicious networks without alerting the operators. We needed to understand exactly how these networks operated, explains FBI Cybercrime Unit Chief Robert Torres. But we couldn't simply shut them down at the first location and alert the operators that they had been discovered. We needed to map the entire infrastructure. Investigators deployed specialized hardware that could passively monitor wireless signals without connecting to suspicious networks. These devices, disguised as ordinary luggage or everyday objects, were carried through targeted airports and public spaces by undercover agents. What we discovered was concerning, says Torres. The malicious networks weren't being broadcast from obvious rogue devices. They were emanating from what appeared to be legitimate Wi-Fi infrastructure, suggesting the operation had somehow compromised official airport systems. When investigators mapped the suspicious networks, they found them operating in 42 major airports across North America, Europe, and Asia, creating a comprehensive dragnet capturing credentials from millions of businesses and leisure travelers daily. The operation used a technique called evil twin deployment at a sophisticated scale, explains Reed. They weren't simply creating rogue networks with similar names to legitimate services. They'd actually compromised portions of the legitimate Wi-Fi infrastructure in these locations. This infiltration of legitimate infrastructure explained how the operation had remained undetected for so long. The malicious networks weren't obvious outliers. They appeared to be official airport services, often with strong signals and high-quality connections that prioritized reliability to keep users connected longer. As the investigation progressed, authorities needed to examine the actual hardware without alerting the operation. In a coordinated effort, technical teams gained access to networking equipment at several airports during routine maintenance windows. What we found was shocking, reveals Torres. The operation hadn't just compromised the software configurations. They had physically modified enterprise-grade networking equipment with additional hardware components designed specifically for credential interception. These modifications included custom processing modules that could analyze network traffic in real time, identifying and extracting authentication data before it reached its intended destination, all while allowing normal internet functionality to continue without disruption. As authorities began identifying and analyzing the compromised Wi-Fi infrastructure, the investigation took a disturbing turn when they discovered how the hardware modifications had been installed in highly secured areas. The physical security breach was as concerning as the digital one, explains Torres. These modifications required direct physical access to networking equipment located in restricted areas. This wasn't something that could be done by ordinary visitors. The investigation revealed that the operation had compromised not just the networks themselves, but the security systems protecting them. They had obtained legitimate maintenance credentials and contractor identifications that granted them authorized access to secure infrastructure areas. But the most alarming discovery wasn't just how the networks were compromised, it was what happened to the stolen credentials after collection. When investigators traced the data exfiltration paths, they didn't find typical criminal operations. They discovered a sophisticated processing infrastructure that sorted, verified, and packaged stolen credentials into premium identity bundles sold through specialized dark web marketplaces. This wasn't random credential theft, reveals Dr. Martinez. The operation had created a sophisticated business model, selling comprehensive digital identities. They weren't just capturing usernames and passwords. They were creating complete authentication packages that included everything needed to bypass even advanced security measures. These packages included primary account credentials, usernames, and passwords, security question answers extracted from email accounts, authentication cookies that bypass multi-factor requirements, device fingerprinting data to mimic legitimate hardware, IP history to establish patterns matching the victim's typical behavior, personal information for identity verification challenges. This represents a fundamental evolution in credential theft, explains Reed. They weren't selling simple login information that would trigger security alerts. They were selling comprehensive digital disguises that could fool even sophisticated authentication systems. Evidence from seized marketplaces revealed the enormous scale of operation. High-value corporate identities sold for thousands of dollars each, while comprehensive personal identity packages, including financial, email, and social media access, commanded premium prices based on the victim's financial resources and online footprint. As digital forensics experts analyzed the compromised Wi-Fi equipment, they discovered sophisticated technical capabilities far beyond typical criminal operations. The hardware modifications included custom-designed processing modules with specialized capabilities, explains Dr. Chen. They weren't off-the-shelf components or common hacking tools. They were purpose-built devices, specifically designed for high-volume credential interception with minimal detection risk. The system operated through a sophisticated process. The modified access points would establish legitimate connections with users. Special processing modules would analyze all traffic in real time. When authentication attempts were detected, the system would capture credentials without allowing the legitimate authentication to proceed. Captured data would be encrypted and transmitted through covert channels. Collection servers would aggregate stolen credentials from multiple access points. What made this system particularly effective was its detection avoidance, says Reed. Unlike typical attacks that cause connection problems or trigger security alerts, this system prioritized maintaining normal connectivity. Users experienced high-quality internet access with no indication their credentials were being harvested. The stolen data wasn't transmitted through obvious channels that might trigger security systems. Instead, it was encrypted and embedded within normal network traffic, hidden inside legitimate data packets using sophisticated steganography techniques that made it virtually undetectable. They were essentially hiding rivers of stolen data within oceans of normal internet traffic, explains Dr. Martinez. Even if someone was monitoring network activities, the exfiltration was designed to blend perfectly with expected patterns. When authorities conducted detailed analysis of the hardware components, they discovered something that pointed to resources far beyond typical criminal groups. The custom processing modules contained advanced application-specific integrated circuits, specialized chips designed for this exact purpose, reveals Dr. Chen. These are components you can purchase commercially. They required sophisticated engineering capabilities and custom fabrication, suggesting nation-state level resources. The technical signatures of the hardware, combined with the sophistication of the overall operation, matched patterns associated with Advanced Persistent Threat, APT groups, the designation given to highly sophisticated threat actors typically associated with nation-state intelligence operations. As authorities continued analyzing the full scope of the operation, they discovered evidence that the airport Wi-Fi networks were just one component of a much larger credential harvesting campaign targeting travelers across multiple vectors. As federal investigators expanded their investigation, they discovered connections between the airport Wi-Fi operation and other sophisticated credential theft campaigns targeting travelers and public spaces. When we compared the technical signatures with other major data breaches, we discovered disturbing similarities, explains Torres. The same operational patterns were appearing across hotel chains, conference centers, and transportation hubs, suggesting a coordinated campaign rather than isolated incidents. This broader pattern included similar credential theft operations targeting major international hotel chains' Wi-Fi networks, convention center networking infrastructure, train station and public transit connectivity, popular tourist destination public networks, corporate guest Wi-Fi systems. Taken together, these compromised networks created what we call a collection mesh, covering key business and tourism infrastructure globally, explains Dr. Martinez. If you were a frequent traveler, particularly for business, it was almost statistically impossible to avoid these networks entirely. This represents a fundamental shift in intelligence gathering, says former intelligence analyst Rebecca Wong, who consulted on the case. Traditional espionage required targeting specific individuals. This approach created a massive dragnet that captured credentials from thousands of potential targets simultaneously, allowing the operators to identify valuable victims after collection. The investigation revealed compromised networks in 37 countries, with particular concentration in financial centers, technology hubs, government capitals, and major business conference destinations, creating what security experts called the perfect operation for corporate and economic espionage. The scale was staggering, explains Wong. In high-traffic locations like London Heathrow or Singapore Changi airports, the operation was potentially capturing tens of thousands of corporate credentials daily, providing access to countless organizations without having to breach their networks directly. But the most disturbing discovery came when investigators analyzed the command and control infrastructure behind the operation. The technical indicators combined with intelligence sources pointed to a sophisticated threat actor with both financial and intelligence objectives. The evidence suggested a hybrid operation, reveals Torres. The technical sophistication and infrastructure pointed to nation-state involvement, but the credential monetization through dark web markets indicated a profit motive typically associated with criminal groups. The investigation revealed a disturbing operational sequence. After credentials were harvested from public Wi-Fi networks, they weren't immediately used. Instead, they were carefully deployed weeks or months later, creating significant attribution challenges for victim organizations trying to determine how their systems had been compromised. What began as a suspicious login alert at a mid-sized technology company had revealed something far more concerning, a sophisticated global operation that had turned public Wi-Fi infrastructure into one of the largest credential harvesting systems ever discovered. The Operation Hotspot investigation led to coordinated international action, simultaneous raids on command infrastructure in multiple countries, emergency remediation of compromised Wi-Fi networks at major airports, global alerts issued to potentially affected organizations, takedown of dark web marketplaces selling the stolen credentials, international arrest warrants for key technical operatives. This case represents a fundamental shift in how we need to approach public network security, says Dr. Chen. We can no longer treat Wi-Fi as a simple utility. these networks have become prime targets for sophisticated attackers, precisely because of our collective complacency. In response to the case, transportation hubs and public venues implemented enhanced protections. New security standards for public Wi-Fi infrastructure, advanced monitoring or unauthorized hardware modifications, regular physical inspection of networking equipment, enhanced verification for maintenance access, segregated network architecture to limit credential exposure. The silver lining to this case is that it forced a complete rethinking of public network security, explains Reed. Today's airport and hotel Wi-Fi system have significantly improved security architectures designed specifically to protect user credentials. This investigation also led to broader security improvements. Creation of the Public Network Security Alliance, development of new technical standards for public Wi-Fi, enhanced traveler education about connection risks, regular security audits for higher traffic networks, international cooperation on network infrastructure protection. But the most important outcome is the awareness that this case created about the risks associated with public Wi-Fi networks that millions use daily without considering the potential security implications. This investigation reveals a troubling reality about public Wi-Fi. Even seemingly legitimate networks can pose serious security risks. Every time you connect to a network you don't control, you're potentially exposing your digital identity to unknown operators. Here are 3 critical steps every traveler should take immediately. Use a reputable VPN service. Virtual private networks encrypt your connection, protecting your data even on compromised networks. Always activate your VPN before connecting to any public Wi-Fi. Implement credential monitoring. Services that alert you to unusual login attempts or credential exposures can provide early warning of compromise. Many password managers include these features. Practice network skepticism. Before connecting to any public Wi-Fi, verify the official network name with staff. Better yet, use your phone's mobile hotspot feature instead of public Wi-Fi for sensitive activities. Here's exactly how to protect yourself when you must use public Wi-Fi. First, ensure your device isn't set to auto-connect to unknown networks. Second, verify the exact network name with official staff. Third, activate your VPN before connecting. Finally, avoid accessing financial accounts or sensitive systems until you're on a network you trust. Remember, even legitimate-looking networks can be compromised or monitored. The convenience of free Wi-Fi often comes with hidden costs to your digital security. When in doubt, use your cellular data connection for sensitive activities. If you've watched this far, you're clearly someone who understands the hidden risks in our connected world that most people ignore. You're part of what we call the digital sentinels, those who recognize that protecting your online identity requires vigilance and knowledge. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications. The next time you're traveling and about to connect to public Wi-Fi, you'll want to remember these critical protection strategies. Join our community by commenting, "I've secured my connections," after reviewing your own Wi-Fi security settings. Share this video with anyone who travels. What they don't know about public Wi-Fi could be exposing their most sensitive credentials. Operation Hotspot may have been disrupted, but the fundamental vulnerabilities remain, warns Dr. Martinez. As our lives become increasingly mobile and connected, public networks will continue to be prime targets. Being cautious about how and where you connect isn't paranoia. It's necessary digital self-defense. As for the millions of credentials already harvested, while dark web marketplaces selling these identities have been disrupted, security experts caution that many compromised accounts remain vulnerable. The digital shadows of this massive operation will continue to affect organizations and individuals for years to come. The question isn't whether public Wi-Fi compromise will emerge. The question is whether you'll protect yourself before connecting to the next network offering free and convenient access. This is Dark Data Files, decoding the digital underworld.